Pat yourself on the back because you are right here, right now, for a reason. Welcome to the On Purpose podcast, where together we will empower ourselves and others to live lives with more passion and purpose.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 144 of the On Purpose podcast. I am excited today to have a guest with us who, quite honestly, wrote a book about a topic that I'm not sure I want to get into a ton, specifically COVID, because it's so paralyzing and people go each way with it and nobody seems to have any patience for anybody else. But after I talked with her via email, we went back and forth, and the approach she took to it, I thought, you know what, we got to help get her story out. And I think it'll resonate with our community. So I'd love to welcome in Larada Horner-Miller to the On Purpose podcast.
Hello there. It's good to be here. Thank you.
Yes. How are you today?
I'm really good. Really good. I'm looking forward to this.
Well, I hope not to not let you down, my friend. That's a lot of pressure over here now. We're excited to have you. So give us a quick rundown of your bio, and sort of the On Purpose community can kind of get an idea of who you are.
Okay. I have written 6 books and 3 cookbooks. I am a retired middle school teacher. My 6 books relate to, most of them are, 5 out of 6 of the books are nonfiction and relate to, 2 of them are memoirs. And this book, The Coronavirus Reflections, could be considered a memoir in some areas. I grew up in a ranching community in southeastern Colorado. I inherited the ranch with my brother and still co-manage it. I live in the East Mountains above Albuquerque, and most people don't even know that this part of the world exists in New Mexico, because I live in Pinon Pine country at about 7,400 feet. I have a master's degree in computers, and my BA degree was in English, and I have a minor in Spanish, and I went to Fort Collins, Colorado.
Very nice. Well, welcome. You're at 7,500 feet, so winter is full on there, yes?
Yes, it is. With a Southwest flavor, because we do get warm days in between.
Really? Yeah. No, New Mexico is nice. I think, honestly, kind of think you hit it on the head when you said a lot of people don't realize that it's down there, but it's a very beautiful country.
Yes, it is. It is. We have desert, we have mountains, we have it all, really.
Sure. All right. Well, before we get into too much of the purposeful content and sharing your messages with the community, I like to warm you up. You know, like at the ranch, you can't just jump on the big bull right out of the chute. You got to warm up a little bit. So, Larada, give me an idea. If you were stranded on an island and you got one food for the rest of your life, what would you be eating?
One food, probably blueberries.
Oh,
I love blueberries.
How's that going to go over on the ranch? I thought for sure you're going to be like a T-bone steak.
My dad's probably rolling over in his grave right now because he was always saying, eat beef, eat beef.
Yeah. Blueberries, huh? What are you going to do with blueberries?
I love blueberries. I eat them every morning. So it's a staple part of my diet.
Okay. Smoothies or in granola?
Yeah, and breakfast. Yeah. I have them every morning for breakfast.
Okay. Now, question number 2 for your warm up here, if you could have one superpower, what would it be and how would you use it?
I think my superpower would be to remind all of us, or it would be to touch everybody in the world today and give them a child heart again, every adult, so that we could really get back in touch with what, that innocent child is, that just loves life and loves to scamper around and, go out in the pasture and chase after bunny rabbits.
Yeah, I love that. You would give everybody a childlike heart.
Yes.
Gosh, could you imagine how much more fun the world would be if people looked at it like kids?
Oh, it'd be unbelievable. It would be a different world. It
for
really
sure,
would.
For sure. All right, last question for you as we warm you up here. What is your favorite book and what book are you currently reading?
My all-time favorite book probably is Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. I mean, that book was just an epic. And right now I'm reading the story of Sister Blandina, and the name of the book is The End of the Santa Fe Trail. And she was a Catholic sister of charity that came out to Trinidad. She was in Trinidad, Santa Fe, Albuquerque, then returned to Trinidad. And this book I'm reading is her journal. And she came out I think in 1872. And she has stories of facing Billy the Kid. She saved one of Billy the Kid's gang and became a friend of Billy the Kid. And therefore, he put it out to his whole gang that any of the Catholic sisters were not to be bothered at all. And it's an absolutely hilarious journal of a woman coming from Cincinnati out to the Wild West.
Yeah, it was definitely wild back then, for sure.
Yes.
Billy the Kid, huh?
Yes.
That's a good legend there. I'm a big fan of Billy the Kid.
Yeah, we are too here in New Mexico. You know, there's lots of stories of him in this state for sure.
So was he really killed by Pat Garrett, or was that a cover up? Where are we gonna go with that?
I know that, you know, there's so many ways you can take that. I'm not sure. You know, wouldn't you love to be a fly on the wall in that old adobe house and be able to have figured it all out? But
yeah,
who knows?
Absolutely. Well, oh man, that's good stuff, and I love that's definitely different. We've never had anybody reference Billy the Kid on here before, so that is a first, which I'm super excited for. So let's talk, Larada. Let's talk about your current book out there and COVID, bitter or better?
Yeah, this wasn't the book I planned to write last year. I have like 4 or 5 others on the till. But my husband and I were in Spain on March the 8th of 2020, and they had 500 cases. And and it was a Saturday, we got home on Sunday, and there were 1,500 cases in Spain. We had been right downtown Madrid. We're at the airport. We're downtown eating dinner that night. So we were right in the midst of it all. So when we got home, I just was sure that there was no way we were going to avoid it. So as I processed the experience, I have a weekly blog, and I wrote about my feelings through poetry and prose, and shared it on my blog. That blog inspired this book because I had readers email me and say, "Wow, you said exactly what I was feeling." So thank you so much for sharing the feeling.
Interesting. And how did you decide to tell that story through poetry? Well,
I have a poet's heart. I know that poetry is. I've written poetry for years, and that's the way I have processed major grief issues. My mother passed away in 2013, and I wrote a poetry and prose that ended up in a book that I wrote called A Time to Grow Up, a daughter's grief memoir. And that's how I processed her grief. The grief that I had over her. Sadly to say, I didn't do that when my dad passed away. I was just like frozen. I did find one poem that I wrote when I was looking through some notebooks a couple months ago or a month ago. But it's just been a way that I've processed life, is writing poetry.
And the response was pretty favorable from your community then? The poems resonated with them?
Yes.
Give us.
And I weave through the poem. It's written in chapters. There's 31 chapters, and there's poetry in not every chapter. So if you're someone who doesn't enjoy poetry, this book is for everybody. And it's not rhyming poetry, it's free verse. So it moves with the reading. But I just knew that every as the pandemic evolved and I faced the fear, I wrestled with God. I chose to let my hair grow out. I used to have this really short spike hairdo. You can see it there. And I let my hair grow out. I was a beautician before I was a teacher. So I cut my own hair for 2 years, and I mean, there were so many changes. My husband and I are dancers. We square dance and round dance. And our life was just absolutely frozen because we usually dance 3 times a week in Albuquerque, and then at least once a month at square dance festivals anywhere in the United States. So it was such a major change. And, I know that a lot of people lost intimate family relatives, and I did have people die, for people I knew that died, but I didn't have that deep loss. But I know a lot of people throughout the world suffered the way I did with the pandemic, and that as I continued writing, I just continued focusing on the losses that I knew that of mine that were kind of universal.
And what would you say to our listeners out there that maybe it's not COVID, it's some, like you said, the loss of your mom or loss of a job or some kind of other event in their life? What would you say to encourage them to maybe write as a means of processing those emotions, whether it's poetry or just narrative, but just getting it on paper? What has that done for you, and how would you encourage them to follow suit?
Well, I read a book many years ago. In fact, I'm on notebook 169. And I read a book by Julia Cameron called The Artist Way. And she basically said that we're all artists, whether you're writing or whether you're a gardener. My husband's a great gardener. Whether you're a taxi cab driver in New York City, you're an artist because you're creating, you're creating an environment. And so writing, I do the morning pages, 3 notebook pages a day. That really got me kind of started along the way of the writing idea. But I would encourage anybody to take that blank page and just become someone who is able to let it out. No editor, no script, just be willing to be in touch with the spirit inside of you. That was one of the positive takeaways that I had, from the pandemic. The book says, the title is Coronavirus Reflections, Bitter or Better. I had a choice. I could be bitter or I could be better. I chose to go deeper spiritually. I've been on a spiritual path for many years, and I chose to go deeper spiritually. So I feel like I have come out of the whole thing better. And that was through the writing. So I think, if you're someone that is new to writing, there are 2 references I would share with you that have changed my life. One is The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And that is, she suggests 3 pages out of a regular standard notebook, spiral a day. And then, and there's just let anything come out. And then the other book is Natalie Goldberg's Writing Down the Bone, which her emphasis is doing writing practice 10 minutes a day and just doing it on a topic, stream of consciousness writing, and making sure that you keep your pen moving for 10 minutes and you don't let the editor out. You just write. So that's the basis of how I wrote this book, is those ideas. And I just think it's a way that works.
Yeah, and we're big within our On Purpose community of having morning routines which include gratitude and journaling. So they're very familiar with the ideas of journaling and the meaning behind it. I love something you said there, which was, don't let the editor come out, because I'll find myself doing that as well, right? Like you start writing and the next thing you know, you're backspacing because you have too many spaces, or you didn't put a period where there should have been, or a comma. And that editor phase kind of kills your creativity.
Yes, it does. It really does. And Natalie Goldberg is, that's one of her biggest subjects that she talks about is, so much of the time, we are so negative. that is the stop point for most people about writing, is that they weren't given that directive in school because they had to do it perfectly. You
Sure.
had to do a draft, a first draft, you had to do a final draft, you had to do revision, whatever. But this whole idea is a whole different, it's a paradigm shift on writing, because it's allowing you, the writer, to get in touch with your soul, I think is the best way to say it. And letting yourself get in touch with your soul and get it out on paper.
Yeah, 100%. But I think you're right. It's interesting because you're a former school teacher, to talk about how a lot of times we unintentionally condition kids to not want to write because there is that expectation that they need to be perfect.
Yeah, I was fortunate. I was really fortunate. I went back to school an older than average student. I was 28 years old, and what I was taught in my methods class at Fort Collins at Colorado State University, they were right on. So I started my methods classes in probably 1984, and so they were right on the edge of. They were turning their back on the old way of writing and embracing the new. So I never was taught the old way of writing. Of course, I experienced it
Sure.
as a student,
Yeah.
but I was never taught that way to teach, and so writing for my students was a whole different experience, and it was absolutely delightful. And, fast forward, I have done memoir workshops with adults in Albuquerque, and there is nothing more rewarding for a writing teacher, I have to be more specific there, than to look out over a group of people, their heads, down, their pens moving fast, and absolute engrossment, they engrossed in the group, in the work, and absolutely engaged in what they were doing. There's nothing more rewarding.
Yeah. And you're helping them put their story on paper. And I'm sometimes amazed, and I often stay mindful to encourage people that every story is worth telling, and you never know how your story is going to impact somebody else, but it can't impact them if they don't hear it.
Right. That's so important. Everyone has a story to tell.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
One of my favorite quotes. Yeah.
Yeah, we all have a story to tell, and I think equally the second part to that equation is there's somebody out there that needs your story.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But if we don't get the courage to write it or just share it, they can never receive it. So how has it been for you diving into the whole COVID? I don't want to call it, I'd just say it's drama, right? Like there's people on both sides. Right. Nobody seems to get along. Right. So to write a book there and kind of put yourself out, because looking at your bio and talking with you, you're very peaceful, very I don't get much confrontation from you. You're clearly tough because you're running a ranch and you're eating blueberries on the ranch, which makes you even tougher because all them cowboys will be trying to feed you beef. But how has the reception been diving into COVID and was into a COVID type topic and book? And was it what you thought or was it different? Talk to me about that.
Well, I was in to see my general practitioner, and he knows I'm a writer. And I told him this was before it was out. This was probably about this time last year. I was working on it, and I told him I was going to write a book about, my reaction to the coronavirus. And he said, "Man, I wouldn't buy that." And so that really kind of, I knew that it would be a tough one, but the reality of it is, as I was processing how I wanted the book to be, and I was looking at the form of it, and then I worked with an editor. Even though I am self-published, I worked with a professional editor, and she gave me lots of great ideas. And I've worked with her. This is the third book that I've worked with her on. She gave me lots of ideas how to organize the book. And so it's written as a journal. So you could write in it and answer questions, because there's like 31 chapters, and it starts with a beautiful picture that relates to the topic, then a quote that relates to the topic, then my experience relating to the topic in prose and or poetry, then it ends with a probing question. And the question is set up for you to relate your experience. So the process that I came to in my mind was, I wanted you to read it, I wanted you to reflect, and I wanted you to respond. So, as this whole thing came into its own life, because the book really takes on its own life, it changed the focus, and yes, it is on the coronavirus and the whole, horrible experience that we all shared. But I really saw that it could be a movement of looking backwards to move forward. So it changed. It didn't become, to me, about a topic that was one that was going to be hard to write about.
Absolutely. And I think, just looking at it in preparation for this interview, you can apply your poems and the lessons to just about anything in life.
Yes. And I think I'm glad you said that, because I think that is the test of poetry, of writing, is that it be able to expand to a larger connection.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you did a great job. And that's similar in my book, is I had questions. So I want them to read and understand a story, then also reflect and apply it to their lives. And I think we could definitely use more of that in this time of our lives with so much uncertainty. And I want to kind of expand on something you said here, looking backward to move forward.
Well, I think thoughtful people, spiritually centered people do that sort of observation. And yet it's challenging, because after having lived through the pandemic, who really wants to go back to day one? Who really wants to go back to the different announcements, and the increase of cases, and the just all of the things that are around that. But if you are someone who is thoughtful about you and your process and where you're going and where you're headed, then if you don't take this opportunity to kind of resolve what happened for you during 2020 and 2021, then is it ever going to be resolved in your life? Are you going to take shadows of the horror with you? And that's kind of what I was alluding to a while ago, is I really believe that this book could be life-changing. And then you've referenced really well how it can you can apply it to the larger world, larger than the coronavirus. And for me, the reference that a lot of this comes from is that, I'm in recovery. I've been in recovery for 33 years. And I have a different life today and a different life view than I had when I got here. And
Yes.
It certainly is big.
Sure. And I think that's important, right? I think I love that you said that. And that's a fantastic segue, is when we look at the world bigger than ourselves, we would make I would say we'd make different decisions than when we look at the world where we're the sole focus.
Right.
Right. And what you're talking about there is having had experience in recovery and coming forward now to where you face a new thing, but you have the perspective and experience of going through stuff in the past that's not unresolved. It's now a strength for you moving forward.
Yes. And that's really where the title comes from, bitter or better, because we do say that in recovery. Life hits all of us over the head. There's nobody that's going to walk through this life and not had heartbreak and heartache. And we're given that option. And see, that's the magic of this, is that we're given the option and the choice. Do I become bitter or do I become better? And it's a personal choice. And I just saw so many people wrestling with the negativity of everything around the virus, the masks, the mandates, all of the stuff that we know so well. And we all know people on every side of the issue. And I just thought it had to be bigger than that.
Yeah, I love it. And the reality is, I think you're absolutely right. Once you get some perspective and you move past the rhetoric and emotion, you do have a responsibility, like any other thing that happens in your life, on how do you emerge from it.
Right. And it's personal choice.
And you have ownership. And that's what I'm a big believer in, accountability. And if your life isn't where you want it, you need to do something to fix it. If you're not happy with your place in life, whether it's career or relationship or whatever's going on, it's nobody else's job to fix that for you.
Right.
Well,
and think about all of the people, I think back to like that first month that we were all sheltering in place, and they would show on TV and on different news stations of people in balconies in Italy singing to each other or playing their instruments to each other across the street, and all of the creative. I guess one of the things that happens in the midst of chaos and a crisis as big as this was, is that you see the creative juices flowing. And it was heartwarming. I mean, I was brought to tears when I saw the people that were willing to stand out on their balcony and play their violin to the people across the street from them. I mean, it was just like, oh my God, this is what it's all about.
It is what we can be about as humans. I think innately we're meant to love each other and care for each other. And sadly, at times we allow external influences to make us forget, right? And I think at times trauma and, would you say, catastrophes are what remind us that we have far more in common than we do differences, right? We find common ground in the face of turmoil.
And I think that happened for people, especially, today in the world with our world's shrunken because of social media and because of the internet. I think that really did happen.
Well, I hope it happened, right? Like, I mean, for you, it happened, which is amazing. And it can happen for many other people if we start moving past things, right? If we quit holding on to whatever beliefs have not served us up till now. So I 100% agree. And I think that I think it's amazing you used poetry to reach out during this time. And it's definitely got me thinking, like, what other creative stuff have people not embraced or it has not come out that would really thrive and bring healing in a time like this?
Yeah. Well, and poetry, the imagery that you can use in poetry and the economy of words, to me, that is the magic of poetry. So, I mean, we use imagery in all writing, but it's so much more stark, I think, in poetry. And so that's the selling point to me whenever I'm getting into deep feelings and deep emotions. I want to be able to express it visually. I'm a visual person, that's why I included so many pictures in my book. And but it's through the words create the picture in a poem. And I think that's part of the reason I embraced poetry, to share this deep disturbance and questioning and anger and horror and sadness and, everything that was going on at the time.
And I love that you mentioned all of those, because I think it's extremely important that you acknowledge that you can go through the range of emotions, right? Like, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be happy. And we're in such a society right now that wants to be perfect, whether it's social media or whatever we're perceived as. Sometimes we compartmentalize things and we suppress the actual emotions would help us move forward.
Yeah, what was interesting was when I was looking for advanced readers for this book, I worked with a marketing agent, and she suggested getting people that were like therapists or psychologists or whatever. So I asked somebody who was a psychotherapist, and I asked somebody who was a life coach. And then I asked a Jesuit priest who's in recovery that I followed for over 30 years. And then I asked the bishop of my church, I'm an Episcopalian, and I asked the bishop of my church if they would be an advanced reader and write a blurb for it. And just feeling like, well, if they say no, then I'll move on to somebody else. And I asked one other person and he couldn't do it. But all four of those people said yes. And the reason why I bring that up is because while you were talking about the compartmentalizing, I struggle with my spiritual life in this book. It's really my spiritual struggle in this book. And so when I gave it to the priest who was in recovery, I knew he would relate to the struggle, and I knew that it wouldn't be an issue. But when I gave it to the bishop of our church, I thought, woo, we're okay.
So we just lost for a second there. Let me take you back. So when you got to the bishop, what did you think?
Okay, when I got to the bishop of my church, I was just really concerned that maybe it wouldn't resonate with him because I struggled with faith. I wrestled with God. Is faith and fear? Can you have faith and fear? That whole thing. And he really got it. The blurb that he wrote for the book it was obvious that he got it. So, whenever you start talking about compartmentalizing, I think we do that to our despair, because in reality, we really are the total person. So, and this book is not a Christian book. It is a spiritual book. I am a Christian, but it is a spiritual book. It is about the spiritual experience that I have had. So,
Yeah, you took a leap of faith and sent it to your bishop, huh?
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Yeah. I'm glad you received it well, and you're still a member of the church there.
Yes, I am. And he, yes. And it was, well, when she said send it to a counselor, I was just thinking, okay, who are the counselors that I know in my life? And I was thinking, well, priests are counselors. And I did send it to my parish priest, but he was too busy to. And parish priests are very, very busy. So, I understood that. And that's not to say a bishop is not busy, but I could understand that he had a little bit more leverage to be able to read it. And it was just interesting to see the people's reaction. The life coach too, her response was really interesting, because she was one of the earliest people I know that was diagnosed with COVID, and she's considered a long hauler. And excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. So she really related to all of the struggle of the whole, the whole book.
Sure. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, fantastic. Now I want to transition here for a second and talk to you about your mission statement, your personal mission statement. You're a baby boomer with a purpose. How did that come about?
That's hilarious. In the month of November, I got involved in a blog challenge. It's called the Ultimate Blog Challenge, where you write one blog post a day. And it was in doing that, I did that. I missed the first day because I didn't know about it. A friend told me about it, and I got in one day late. But as I was writing one of my blog posts, I realized that is who I am. I'm 68 years old. I don't think of myself as an elder, but I really am moving into that position. And I like the word crone. I am a crone, a wise crone. And so I really know that, I'm a good example of the baby boomer world. I've lived out the whole, 60s, 70s insanity. So I thought, you know what? I'm older, but I really still have a purpose in life. It's not like I'm retired and sitting on the couch drinking beer and watching the soap operas as they go by. I have a very full, rich life with a
Yeah.
purpose.
And what would that purpose be? What would you say right now you feel is your purpose?
Well, it's the writing, and that is to share. I just hope that my words touch people's hearts. I hope there is a connection made.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And what now are you writing about the ranch at all too? Do you have any Western style books or?
I have. I haven't written about them. My first two books were about the ranch. The first one was This Tumbleweed Landed, and it was a collection of poetry and prose about growing up in the 50s and 60s as as a youngster in the rural community near, with the ranching influence. Then the second one was I fictionalized a story that I wrote that I heard my whole life. I fictionalized it and wrote a historic fiction about that. I haven't gone back to my ranching roots on writing. Well, I did on the next book. I wrote A Time to Grow Up, a daughter's grief memoir. And there's a lot of ranching in that because I talk about both of my parents. But my next book that I'm writing is going to be it's an interesting book. My fifth book I wrote was the authorized biography of a square dance caller, the most famous square dance caller in the world. His name was Marshall Flippo.
I saw that.
I was raised square dancing. My husband and I met square dancing. And so my next book, in fact, I'm working on it right now. I'm also working on audiobooks. So that's taking me down a different path too. I'm going to do audiobooks for all of my books. And that has been a learning curve that has been exciting. But my new book the name of it is, or the title is, Yeah, I Said Yes. And it is about my experience of writing the biography of that world famous square dance caller, because that was life changing. I never planned on writing it. It was dropped in my lap.
By family, or how did that come to be?
Well, not by family. It was funny. We were at a square dance, and we were at a festival, and a group of us were sitting around after the dance. This Marshall, we call him Flippo, that's the name he went by. He was in his mid 80s, late 80s, and somebody said, somebody needs to write his biography before he passes away. My husband looked at me and said, "You're the writer in the group, why don't you do it?" And it just resonated with me. I took some time and, prayerfully thought about it. Then I approached him after, it was hilarious, after 2 or 3 months of putting me, standing off, he said yes. And we only had 2 face-to-face conversations. The rest of it was, I have 40 hours of phone interview. Because he was elderly, I limited the interviews to an hour of a phone call. I had 250,000 words I transcribed.
Oh, wow.
And I learned so much in writing that book that I decided I really needed. Oh, the other thing that happened is while I was interviewing him and transcribing, well, I guess more is while I was interviewing, my husband said, "You know what I think you should do? You should keep a journal about this experience." And I'd already done it. That was a fun thing. My husband is very involved in my book publication. I bounce a lot of ideas off of him, and so he's very into it. And so I did. So I have a lot of my reaction to what was going on in those interviews. And then I'm going to have the book into 2 parts. One of them is going to be kind of like the journal, and then the second part is how to interview someone, how to make sure. There's a lot of people that are identified in this book, and so in his book, it's really a history book of square dancing.
Yeah.
And so I had to make sure that I could. He told stories on a lot of people. Then they told stories on him.
That's
so I had
funny.
to get permissions. There was a lot of back work that I had to do. And I say,
go ahead.
Yeah. So I just thought, you know what? This is how I did this. I need to share with the world.
Yeah. Now let me ask, was Marshall Flippo, was he still alive when the book came out?
No, and that was
Okay.
heartbreaking. That was heartbreaking. He died. And the other part that was heartbreaking was that we didn't get to finish it as in depth as completely as we would have liked to. But his son and ex-wife were involved through the whole process with him. And so after he died, I worked with them. They helped me decide on the cover. I ran the cover by him. And in fact, his son wrote the foreword, which was beautiful. I mean, it was just amazing. And when I talked to Flippo about who was to write I kept asking him before he passed away, who do you want to write the foreword? And he would say, Betty Casey. Oh no, she's dead. You know, when you're in your late 80s, you know, he's in his late 80s, and then he'd say, J.C. Wilson. Oh no, he's dead. And it was like, okay, I get it, Flip. The people you want to write it have already gone. So whenever I got to that point, I was like, who am I going to get to write the foreword? I had a list of about 3 people. And my husband and I were in the hot tub one night, and we were mulling over it. And he snapped his fingers and looked at me, and he said, John Flippo. And I went, oh my God, that's brilliant. And the part that was so interesting about that, this kind of gets back to what we were talking about, you know, before, you know, and the whole idea of writing. And I said, John, would you write the foreword? And he was absolutely taken back. And he wrote it. And then he apologized. Now, if you don't like it, you know, you don't have to use it. You know, you could just tell he was so nervous because he wasn't a writer. And I tell you, it is such a heartfelt foreword. You just cry. You cry in the foreword.
Oh, that's so good. Now, because I'm sitting here just trying to put myself in your shoes, where you're interviewing a legend of a certain area in life, and your job is to bring their story to life forever. How hard was that for you to carry that weight? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does. And you know what? I was fortunate. There was something that happened. We met face to face to start off, and he handed me a stack of 6 scrapbooks, and I looked through them, and it was like, oh my gosh. And so I had known him for years. And when he quit Square Dance Calling, they had a big celebration for him, and a friend did this big presentation, and I got and I'm a computer person, so I did a mini version of what he did. And I happened to think one day I'm going to call the guy that did the big presentation, Stan, and see if he happens to have these scrapbooks digital. I emailed him, and he did, and within a week he had them to me. Well, so within about a month or 2, I did the second face-to-face with Flippo, and I gave him back the scrapbooks. So what we did, it was unbelievable to try to stitch this together. That was my job. And that's what he kept saying. He said, I have no idea how you're going to do this. But what I did on the interviews was the scrapbooks became the center of conversation. So I was on my computer looking at a page. He was at home in Tucson, Arizona, looking at a page. And we talked about everything on the page. And so I took notes. I have 4 steno pads full of notes, and I recorded everything.
Oh, that's a genius idea.
Yeah. So then whenever I went, and when I went back, I was hoping there was some way I could automatically have the text transcribed. I tried Word, I tried Google Docs, and he was a Texan, so he had a very strong Texas accent. Those transcribers could not figure out what he was saying. I bought Dragon Speak transcription. I tried a variety of things.
Couldn't speak Texan?
They couldn't speak Texan. So I transcribed all 250,000 words.
Oh, and my goodness.
a feat beyond belief. But in answering that question, that's really one of the key things on an interview, is to have a focus. And he was 87 years old, so it was really going to be hard. When we started, we did it chronologically, and he had an absolute photographic memory, so that made it so much easier. So if, for example, when he was talking about, he did half of a year in one place, and then he traveled the United States, doing square dance festivals. Well, so when he would start talking to me about his tour, he thought geographically. So he would give me names. He would go north and give me names. He would go north from, he was in Missouri. He was in Osage Beach, Missouri, at a square dance resort. And he would go north, and he would give me names and cities and festivals. And of course, then the scrapbooks helped us. Then he would go east. He would go down the eastern seaboard. He would come back west to Texas, because he lived in Texas, by Christmas time. Then he would go north again just a little, and then go west and come back to Osage to start his spring program. But what was amazing is he thought geographic. So he would go, oh, that guy in Memphis was da 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 da. Oh, that guy at Chula Vista Resort was da 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 da.
Sure.
And then he would relate the stories. So, my notes were unbelievable, and I would asterisk them and say, like, Chula Vista, remember this for Chula Vista, remember this for Memphis, Tennessee, remember this for Japan.
That's amazing. And
Yeah.
you were able to bring his story to life forever. Right now it's in a book. It can live on forever.
Yes. And it's in his Texas twang. Some people are offended by that. There's one of his lifelong friends who's now 95 years old, and he read it and he said, "Larada, we don't talk like that." He read part of it, and after he just read part of it, and whenever he read the whole book, he sent me an email, and he said, "You nailed it." He said, that is so good. You did such a great job.
That is so awesome. I couldn't imagine a greater honor than having somebody ask you to memorialize their life story so that it could live for future generations. Yeah.
Well, he was so humble. He didn't believe that, he didn't understand his place in history in the world of square dancing. So he was a very, very humble man. He told me from the very beginning, don't make me a hero in this book. I am not a hero.
Oh man, we could use more humility in the world, huh?
Yeah, really.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you being on with us, Larada. Can you give us, if you could, if our listeners out there are struggling with stepping into their purpose, maybe they see it, but they're not taking steps towards it, or maybe they're not even finding it yet. Could you give our listeners a couple tips on what you would suggest they do to start living life with more purpose?
Well, I did not publish my first book until I was over 60 years of age, but I had written it 20 years before. And so what I would say is, whatever your dream is, it doesn't have to be a book. It can be it can be a beautiful, maybe you're an artist, a closet artist, or a closet gardener, or a closet singer. Grab onto your passion. It's our passions that ignite us. And the regret I have in my life is that I waited to ignite that passion. And I would ask that you learn from me and go grab it now.
Love it. I love it. Where can our community follow you? Where would you like them to come follow you? Especially with the blog and social media. And I see the books are up on Amazon. So where would you like them to follow you?
Well, I'm on all of social media. My webpage is laradasbooks.com. That's LARADAS books, BOOKS.com. And you can get all the information about my books and me there. I'm on Facebook a lot. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Pinterest.
You're crushing
LinkedIn.
social media, huh? You
Yes,
enjoy social media?
Yes, I do. I really do.
Good.
I love it.
Good for you. Well, we'll make sure we connect with the podcast with you. And again, we thank you so much for your time coming on to share your story with our community, and much respect to you for all you've done and the thoughts that you're provoking to help make the world a better place.
Thank you. And thank you for doing this. You're doing a very creative, awesome, purposeful thing by doing this.
We appreciate
Just know
it.
that.
Thank you so much.
And remember, team, life is far too short to live any other way than on purpose. We will see you all again next week.